Paul wrote this letter from Corinth on his third missionary journey. And when I say missionary journey, don't think of a missions trip. Because Paul didn't go on a trip for 8 days or 10 days. Paul went on journeys that lasted years. They went on long treks, multiple cities, not knowing where they would go when they left, but knowing that God would lead them to another place to share the gospel. We believe that Paul wrote this letter in about AD 55. And so when he wrote to the Romans, he had been serving Jesus for about 20 years, preaching the message of the gospel of Christ, planting churches, traveling from place to place, training guys in those churches to be the leaders of those churches so he could leave and go to another city. Can you imagine that? I can't wrap my mind around the life that Paul led. I've lived in Chandler for 8 years, and I can't imagine where I would be and what it would be like if when I got here someone hadn't started this church. Thankfully, Brother Helms had started the Faith Frugal Baptist Church in the late 70s. There was a group of people that had joined together. There were leaders that were in place, that were solid on the gospel. But Paul would come into a place where there was no church. He would establish a church, and then he would leave, having set up leaders in that church so he could go to another place. How did Paul do that? When I think about Paul doing this constantly, going to a place where there was no church, building up a church from nothing, and then leaving it with people from that city who were going to be leaders in the church, I think he must have been some kind of superhero, right? I mean, he was the Chuck Norris of pastors, right? I mean, he was some kind of church planner that he could do this in city after city after city. When you read through the book of Acts, you see all that Paul did, you say, man, what a powerful life. He's more than a man. He's a legend. He's an urban myth. He's so impressive. But Paul wasn't impressive. Paul's God was impressive. And his gospel message was impressive. You see, Paul's life was powerful because the gospel is powerful. Paul made an impact in those cities, not because of who he was, but because of the message that he preached. Paul had churches planted because he preached a gospel of grace, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Paul's telling us in these verses that his calling and ministry was because of the gospel and because of God. It was God working through him. He led a powerful life because he believed the gospel.